Did you see the article on ESPN about the Eagles and what appears to be a rather tumultuous situation that they had last year? Mina has read it, so I will tell you people about this. It's a pretty interesting look back. And look, the Eagles, they started 10-1 last year, but it was a 10-1 that always felt a little shaky as far as 10-1s went. And then they started doing a bunch of losing, and their offense didn't seem to be in sync. They fired the defensive coordinator during the year. They fired the offensive coordinator at the end of the year. They were brown, both of them. Different Browns, but Browns nonetheless and blamed for everything. And then you wind up reading the story, and it seems that the issue that we have is that the quarterback and the head coach are not on the same page at all, to the point of Jalen Hurts at some points calling his own plays and believing that the head coach was simply not adjusting enough in the way that he ran his offense. And I'm going to give you my first thought, and then I'm curious yours, obviously. But I read that story and I could not believe they did not fire the head coach. This seems like a situation that cannot get better. Like if the quarterback does not believe the head coach has got it and the quarterback has already gotten the extension, I can't believe the coach still coaches there.
Well, we were literally on Nick Sirianni firing watch. Do you remember this at the end of the season?
Yes.
We were sitting around on ESPN like, he's going into the meeting with Jeffrey Lurie. Will he come out alive? And we had to wait for it to pan out. And then for this to drop, I mean, and then you bring in, by the way, Kellen Moore, who, whatever you think of his recent work, has been a head coaching he's been interviewed for those jobs. Vic Fangio, who's been a head coach. Those are both interim coaches just sitting right there. If they don't it's like Mike McCarthy bringing in Mike Zimmer. Like, when a coach is already on the hot seat, but then you bring in someone who has experience and the owner probably feels comfortable going to, your days feel numbered unless they get off to a roaring start.
Well, it makes you wonder, were those your calls, right? Or were they somebody else's? Like Vic Fangio, that's a guy, the offensive guys seem to like to call Vic Fangio because they have trouble against Vic Fangio defenses, right? Like that one always goes. Coaches call the guys that make it difficult for them. But with Sirianni calling Kellen Moore, I thought that one was interesting because also if the offense gets better, you're not really going to get any credit for it because we've seen your movies. And I mentioned about the assistants, by the way, that, had to run out of there. Brian Johnson was getting hell left and right last year for all these things and all these calls. And it seems very clear he was doing the job of the boss from reading this article. Like, that's what was going on there. He's out of there. Jalen Hurts. And so this is the level that I hadn't thought about. I knew that Jalen Hurts' father was a coach, but I went to his Twitter page today, and in the bio, it says quarterback developer. I did not realize that was how his pop sees himself. But no. This is where this ties over to the Brian Johnson, the old offensive coordinator. So this is, if I can get into my Houston bag just a little bit. Brian Johnson played quarterback for Utah in college. In 2008, when they went undefeated and beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, he was the quarterback. He has been a boy wonder of offensive coaches for a while, but now is at that point where it's about time for somebody like that to get a head coaching job. He was offensive coordinator for them last year. He's assistant head coach in Washington this year. He's been offensive coordinator at University of Florida, at Houston. He was coordinator at Utah at age 25, right? This is Brian's background. But Brian is from Baytown, Texas. He went to Robert E. Lee High School. And Robert E. Lee High School had a run where they produced, like, this dude, Jermaine Alfred, who played at Baylor. He was a first-team All-State quarterback. Clint Sterner, who does the radio in Houston now, but he was an NFL quarterback, played quarterback at Arkansas, was a very good college quarterback. L. Roberson, who started at quarterback for Kansas State, won a Big 12 championship, BCS bowl game. Drew Tate, who played quarterback at Iowa, first-team All-Big Ten guy. And then Brian Johnson, who I just described. And I did not realize that Jalen Hurts' dad had coached Brian Johnson in high school, which tells me that he had a hand in all of these quarterbacks that I just listed to you, which tells me Jalen Hurts got another quarterback coach at all times. All times. Mm-hmm. His coach was coached by his dad, and all of them seem to think that Nick Sirianni was not doing the job right. This is not going to get any better, I don't think.
That's interesting because what you're saying about Hurts' dad, which I didn't know, because one of the pluses for Hurts as a prospect coming into the NFL was that he's always been described as immensely coachable. This is a guy who has changed programs, who has changed coaches, who's changed coordinators, who has also gotten better over the course of not just his college career, his NFL career. So if you look at the body of work here, the evidence suggests that Jalen Hurts is not a guy who is inclined to override his coaches, to make it about himself. I'm just like, I remember Hurts in college, I think this was actually after college, talking about Nick Saban and just like how much he was like, yeah, he's like the most like me than of any coach I've ever. Nick Saban? I remember hearing that, thinking like that is really unusual, and I remember thinking this at the time. Man, NFL teams are gonna eat that up, right? Because this kid, and of course you remember the infamous Tua replaced him, and he was so gracious about it, and he whatever. Anyways. Point is, he is not a guy who has been tagged at any point in his career with this reputation as being difficult, uncoachable, going above and beyond, calling his own play. So when you read an article like this and you're trying to decipher, okay, what's going on? Because we obviously got competing sources, we've got competing agendas. I'm inclined to believe that the criticism of Sirianni is substantiated. And not just because of personality stuff, but Sirianni, you remember Jalen Hurts' first year gave up play calling midpoint because he wasn't going well. And Shane Steichen, who I think is very good, took over and suddenly the offense looked awesome. So if you're asking me to look at this guy now and ask and sort of gauge whether or not he's helpful, whether he's doing a good job, I'm inclined to be a little bit skeptical.
I feel like this situation is spelling out the difference between a white collar job and a blue collar job, right? In a white collar job, if you have achieved a certain level of success and then things go to hell, the belief is that you deserve the chance to right your wrong, right? Like you have earned this equity, you have earned this benefit of the doubt. Blue collar jobs don't work that way. Somebody in a blue collar job who started failing at their job in the way that Sirianni did last year, you just go get another one of those. That's how that goes. That's how that goes basically with every position in the NFL, except for quarterback, except depending on what your contractual situation is. I mean, we was ready to toss Kyler Murray out the window not too long ago. Like, this is how this goes, except when the quarterback is worth $1 gazillion. And so I was shocked looking at all of this. You've made Jalen Hurts your guy, right? That is who he is. Generally speaking, if this was going to be the case with the quarterback and the head coach, and a head coach that people aren't that crazy about, and don't forget, this is the dude, Nick's got a weird press conference. Why is he around? Remember that? Like, I'm a little surprised.
The clip of him, you remember walking off the field to this is a guy who has talked a big game. He's been out there. He's very emotional on the sidelines and whatnot. But I think your point about Jalen Hurts making a lot of money is so interesting, and it completely changes the dynamic of this story. And it very much so changes how fans take this, because last year when everything fell apart, I think like we don't appreciate how unbelievably dramatic the Eagles' downfall was last year. Or maybe not we don't appreciate it. At the time it felt crazy, but we've kind of, gotten some distance around it, and that team melted down and stopped trying, frankly, in a way that we rarely see in the NFL. And I think as fans have tried to reckon with that, because you have a quarterback who not only played really well in a Super Bowl and was amazing that season, was MVP candidate, but you're locked in with him, you're inclined to side with him here. Like, the power, to your point, is not what it typically is. And if you read a story like this as a fan, you want Sirianni out. You're not going to side against the quarterback who you need as a fan to believe can get back to playing the way he did. So Sirianni has not much leg to stand on if this is actually a power struggle going on.
In my experience of watching sports, and honestly, just generally speaking with life, and I could be wrong about this, okay? A team don't unquit on you. They only quit on you once. Right? And once they've quit on you, the quitting is in perpetuity. They do not unquit on you. Like what happens to a guy like Sirianni normally, and look, it was great for Chip Kelly when it first started there. And then I think they gave him like 2 years and change, but it can fall apart very quickly. And normally for a guy like him, especially he's a pretty young guy, the team quits on you. You go somewhere, you get you another offensive coordinating position. You learn from, you learn your lessons, and then you come back. But they said he came back in the article that he came back before the team and said last year was all me and it was a very vulnerable thing from a guy they found to be brash and everything else. And good for you, dog. I've just never heard of a team unquit on a coach before. Never seen it.
Especially if that coach isn't calling plays, doesn't have a track record with this team of the offense being super successful with him at the helm. Because there are coaches, there's a lot of coaches who don't call plays on offense or defense. John Harbaugh, for example, he's like a CEO. If you don't call plays, you got to be a great manager, a great leader. You got to be great at hiring. So when you look at someone like your Sirianni and you're like, okay, well, you don't call plays, and you were clearly your track record when it comes to hiring, debatable whose fault it is, whatever, both sides of the ball, but it's not great. What is it that you do here? I think that's kind of where this team is at right now. They're looking at the head coach and they're saying, why? What are you bringing to the table, dude?
Hey, let me tell you, that's a bad question to ask in a place like football. So, for example, I'm leaving you completely out of this just so you know I'm not going to say anything that would get you in trouble anyway. But like at ESPN, when I worked there, I don't know what anybody does, right? Like people work there, people are important, people have various jobs. I can name for you lots of people who work at ESPN. If you ask me what they do, I have no idea, right? On a football team, you know what everybody does. The titles are very clear. What do? I coach wide receivers. What do? I coordinate the run game. While I don't exactly understand what coordinating a run game means, I know what run, game, and coordinator mean, and I can put them all together, and we could come to a solution, okay? When you have a job with a clear title and people still don't know what you do, you have a problem.